No, just stop listening to me going on about my favourite subject of child safeguarding. For anyone who doesn't know who I am, I'm Tanya Carter and I'm one of the spokeswomen for Safe Schools Alliance. It's great to be back here because in this room in 2019, when we were given our first opportunity to speak publicly, that wasn't me, that was Tracy. But I would just like to thank Bernadette and Joe, who's run off, for giving us that first opportunity. And I think not enough acknowledgement is made of women like Bernadette or Joe, who are always in the background. They've been really solid. They've always supported all women, regardless of background and how you came to this. They've been really solid on standing up for children as well as women. So I really want to acknowledge that and thank you very much. And it is proof of how much I like these women that I'm actually here because I'm missing out on vodka jellies and a hot tub to be here. Child safeguarding. So, Safe Schools Alliance, we campaign nationally on safeguarding failures in UK schools, particularly around the teaching of gender identity ideology and inappropriate relationship, sex and health education materials. I would like to make it very clear, though, that we are actually in favour of personal, social and health education and relationship and sex education. We view it as a really important part of safeguarding. However, many, if not most, materials currently available in UK schools can harm, not help children. The fact that many in schools and governments have been undifferentiated between harmful and helpful materials is evidence of the widespread lack of understanding of what safeguarding actually is and how wide its scope is. It is incredibly concerning, not only how many in government, but also campaigners, many of whom have self-identified themselves as feminists, have been unable to take on board the message that education is important, but it must be for the benefit of the children that it is delivered to, and must not be used as a vehicle for political indoctrination or even worse, be used to groom children to lower their boundaries, thus leaving them more susceptible to abuse. This particularly affects girls. It is also important that the message children take from education is not that they are responsible for protecting themselves, for this is victim blaming. Children must be taught that they are worthy of protection and that adults have a duty to protect them from harm. So, as I said, Safe Schools have been campaigning officially since May 2019. Most of us were campaigning as individuals before then. And as we enter our 7th year of campaigning, it is disturbing how gender identity ideology and not safeguarding has become embedded in many of our institutions supposed to protect children. The sticking plasters, such as the government's new relationship, sex and health education guidance, which are being applied to this travesty, not working to protect children, and they never will. The root causes need to be addressed. Why is safeguarding so poorly understood? How have our institutions been infiltrated? Why do so many people feel that adult feelings are more important than child welfare? Why is there such a reluctance to address how equality has been used to undermine safeguarding? Why are spurious allegations of transphobia, homophobia, racism, and name-calling such as culture, truth and far right still not recognised by many as the silencing techniques that they are? Safeguarding will not be fully restored without a public inquiry that answers all of these questions and many more. Safeguarding is everyone's responsibility and everyone must play their part in highlighting failures, particularly the parents of children currently in schools. They must be alert to what their children are being taught and the dangers of some materials, particularly if activist teachers have infiltrated their schools. Despite some recent gender-critical court wins, there is absolutely no indication that the situation in schools is improving for children. In fact, in schools where activists have embedded themselves, the situation is deteriorating as ideological teachers are emboldened by a Labour government that has had to be dragged kicking and screaming to acknowledge the recent Supreme Court judgment that said, as we all knew it did, does in fact mean biological sex and not a feeling in some sad transvestite's head. And whilst the meaning of Sex and the Equality Act has now been clarified in law, if not in practice, nothing has been done to address the fundamental question of how various notions of equality are allowed to undermine safeguarding in the first place. When I was chair of governors of a junior school, which is how I got into all this, I did a huge amount of safeguarding training, including safer recruitment training, to try and ensure that the children for whom I was responsible were kept as safe as possible. My training covered such awful cases as the first gay male foster carers whom everyone was so proud of, who are now imprisoned for raping vulnerable children in their care. These child rapists weaponised accusations of homophobia against those raising concerns about their conduct. This worked for far longer than it should have done before they were caught, charged, convicted, and imprisoned. Harm was enabled to children by those who prioritised accusations of homophobia above taking a safeguarding birth approach. I was also taught about the risk of FGM to girls in the country from certain communities and the risk of enabling these harms by being sensitive to cultural differences rather than dealing with the severe child protection issues staring you in the face. And of course, I was taught about the wide-scale rape of girls, many of whom were supposedly in the care of the state, by the so-called grooming gangs, and how racism was used as a silencing technique against those desperate to raise awareness of their plight and the misogyny and indifference of the police. So it was obvious to me that transphobia was yet another silencing technique being used against those raising concern about the dangers of males in female spaces, particularly adult males seeking to gain access where female children, girls, were sleeping and undressing, such as was the case with girl guiding. What shocked me, and continues to shock me to this day, is that anyone charged with safeguarding children in their care did not see this. Had they not attended the training I had? Had they not understood it? Were they deliberately ignoring it? All of these are negligence. Again, a question for the now inevitable public inquiry. When safeguarding failures were exposed at NSPCC, Bergdorf inviting children to direct message him on James Makings in detailed descriptions and pictures of his fetishes, including video of him masturbating supposedly at work at a children's charity. The same tired distraction techniques were used, calling concerned individuals homophobic. Anyone who works in any capacity with children should have recognised this for what it was and called it out. Instead, the NSPCC, who should have been educating the public on safeguarding and silencing techniques, were at the forefront of calling members of the public raising the alarm homophobic. More worrying still, I encountered women in GC circles who identified as feminists and identified as understanding safeguarding, taking these allegations seriously. So, are we any further forward 6 years on? Frankly, no. Since starting to write this speech, it has come to light that a BBC presenter, Dr. Wonks, who identifies as a black, non-binary, trans-masculine emergency doctor, has launched the Safe With Me initiative, aimed at both workplaces and schools. This initiative aims to provide individuals with badges indicating to trans people that they are a safe person to approach and will happily accompany them to a toilet of their choice. You really do not need to have attended any safeguarding training whatsoever to see the dangers in encouraging children to wear badges offering to accompany strangers to toilets. It really is beyond shocking that years of the safeguarding implication of education that erodes children's boundaries being put out, this has happened yet again. It is also shocking that our national broadcaster is once again involved in attempting to undermine public understanding of safeguarding, despite years of various groups pointing out its bias, poor understanding of child protection, and the disinformation being spread by its misinformation specialists. The BBC appear to have learned absolutely nothing from the Savile scandal, and more recently, the Russell Brand scandal. Safeguarding is not a checklist, it's not a policy, it is a culture. And the BBC culture appears to be the very antithesis of effective safeguarding. And this is not an isolated incident. As the Sandy Peggy case dominates the news, we continue to hear from parents whose children are being denied the single-sex facilities that they are legally entitled to in schools. The amount of work being done by nameless parents to challenge these appalling breaches of safeguarding as the government looks the other way is as unsustainable as it is unacceptable. The state has a duty to keep children safe when they are acting in loco parentis, and in this they are failing abysmally. We are stuck with a government who seems to think the height of child protection is providing a minority of children with some free Rice Krispies in the morning. We are also continuing to hear about schools being evasive at content of their PSHE lessons, thus denying parents the opportunity to make an informed choice and discharge their parental responsibility to safeguard their own children. We also continue to receive reports of non-binary teachers wishing students to address them as mixed. And Jen spoke about this earlier, and asking their classes to write down their pronouns. Some of these reports have come from primary schools. This simply should not be happening. It is yet more evidence of the complete failure to embed safe recruitment properly. Individuals wishing to work with children for their own validation and not for the benefit of those children should be identified during the interview process and weeded out. Wanting to work with children, spread your political views, or to validate your gender identity is a very clear sign of an unsuitable individual. People recruiting for schools should know this. No one who lies about their sex should be employed in a school. No man who expects to identify his way into female spaces should work with children in any capacity or on policy that affects them. The failure to prioritise safeguarding and the correct application of laws such as the Education Act 1996 over at least the past decade is not only detrimental to the children themselves, but is having a horrific knock-on effect on the rest of society. Children who are fed falsehoods their whole life by those they trust becoming indoctrinated. And as we've just heard from Connie, this indoctrination continues and in fact ramps up at universities with young adults. These children then turn into adults such as Isla Bumba in their workplaces, creating a hostile environment for non-believers, especially women, and costing their companies vast sums of money as the legal cases roll in. In Ida Bumba's case, as it is the NHS she's installed in, it is vast sums of public money. Her indoctrination is costing the rest of us. So we're in a position where vast sums of public money have been spent on indoctrinating children, and then further vast sums of public money are going to be spent on clearing up the harm their indoctrination causes once they enter the workplace. I'd also expect in the future vast sums of public money to be spent on legal cases brought against schools by adults who realise the indoctrination and emotional abuse they were subjected to as children in schools. If you check out our website, you will see an in-depth and powerful testimony from a mother and reality in one school with activist teachers. And I really recommend that you all do go on our website and read this because it's a very important piece. And this mother who wishes to remain nameless but has spent so much time and effort on this to try and protect children. This is not an isolated incident. This will be being repeated up and down the country. So some people are celebrating the end of the turf wars. The situation in schools is rapidly deteriorating. We see no hope for improvement without the government acknowledging the scale of safeguarding and ordering a far-reaching public inquiry. Without understanding how and why established safeguarding has failed so comprehensively, there can be no way forward. It is not just gender identity ideology. With the dismantling of effective safeguarding, children are at risk of all sorts of harm. It will be the most vulnerable, such as those in care with no adult to protect or advocate for them, who will suffer the most severely. It also goes without saying that as part of the restoration of safeguarding, the Gender Recognition Act 2004 will need to be repealed. Absolute travesty of a piece of legislation should never have been passed in the first place. And at the very least, the protected characteristic of gender reassignment will need to be removed from the Equality Act. Any and all legislation that has been used to undermine safeguarding and place children at risk of harm will need to be forensically examined in a public inquiry and any loopholes being exploited by predators closed. So the situation in schools is dismal, particularly for girls. So what can you do? Speak out. Don't accept this. We only have rights and child protection frameworks because women before us spoke out. They did not accept it, and nor should you. Women in the Victorian age, with no rights of their own, spoke out against child prostitution, otherwise known as child abuse and rape, and they got the age of consent raised. Do not entertain accusations that you are a racist or transphobic or a homophobe. You are not, and nobody actually believes that. They just want you to shut up and stop drawing attention to their wrong. Don't. Visit your local school. Go through the complaints process. There is a guide on our website, step by step, to help you do this. Harangue your local representatives, local councillors, your MP. Challenge those undermining safeguarding, particularly teaching unions. Talk to people, your friends, family, neighbours. The woman next to you in the supermarket queue. Normal people want to protect children. Despite the decades-long media campaign to disparage child protection, elderly people do want to help. Create a groundswell of public opinion. This country, indeed this world, does value children, and we will protect them from the minority that wish them harm.